Welcome back. Today we are going to hopefully finish building the that guy there. Okay. The other videos we built up the board. That's the board we built. Now we're going to install it in the box. We're going to see a bunch of different wiring techniques and some strain relief techniques. We're going to talk about some different types of equipment that we didn't really get to use in the other videos, and that will complete, hopefully, this particular series, and then we'll move on to other things like cables and actual guitar wiring and soldering to trem claws. You know, that's always a pain, but there's a couple tricks there we can do to make it a little bit easier. Okay. First thing we want to do, let's talk about the wire. Let's talk about some wire strippers. This is all new stuff that we didn't talk about already. So let's get that out of the way. Oh, that's so good. Alright. Wire. The wire that I use pretty much exclusively for this kind of work is 24 gauge. It's what's called pre-bond. And what the pre-bond means is this wire is actually already pre-tinned. When they make these wires, okay, what they do is the bare wire, at least one way of making these. I'm sure there's other ways, but they have a solder bath, and the wire basically goes in one side and comes out the other side and comes out tinned. Now that's really nice for a couple of reasons. Number one, because it's a stranded wire, but because it's tinned, it has a little bit of stiffness to it. So when we make a little bend, it'll kind of stay put. It's not perfect, but it's much easier to work with than just regular stranded wire. So that's number one. Number two, you always want to tin your wire before you solder to it. You don't want to solder to untinned wires. And one problem when you're tinning your wires is you really kind of don't want to flow solder up under the insulation. And the reason is, let's get back to the flux. You know, you're going to flow flux under the insulation. May or may not be properly heated, or you may be using a different type of flux that maybe does need to be cleaned. So you don't want that. So what you would have to do is strip the wire and then be very careful not to flow the solder underneath. Okay. Having it pre-tinned just makes everything very, very easy. I actually get this from, I get a lot of components from Small Bear Elec, smallbearelec.com. Guy's name's Steve. He's really great. I buy this stuff. In fact, most of my components here, a lot of the caps and switches and resistors and things, you can get a lot of stuff from him, especially if you're purchasing in some larger quantities. His not only does he have pretty much everything I need, but his prices are really great. I mean, I've been doing this, like I said, a long time, and it's very hard to match his prices really anywhere. I buy this wire, obviously, in large spools, like 1,000-foot spools. You're probably not going to want to buy a 1,000-foot spool, but you may buy a 50-foot spool. I believe he sells them in 50-foot spools. And he also sells this in shorter lengths, I think, maybe like 10 feet, or hey, you know, you're gonna have to go out and look. I'm not really sure, but I do know that he has some in shorter lengths, maybe not this stuff. But 24 gauge pre-bond. 24 gauge pre-bond is what it's called. Okay? It's the wire. This is really great stuff. Actually, let's just strip a little bit. Show you what it looks like. put my hand behind it to try to get this to focus. Okay, you can see it's stranded, but it's actually tinned. Okay? Okay. Very good. Alright. Next thing we need to talk about are strippers. Wire strippers. Lots of different styles of wire strippers. Lots of different people do different things with. Okay, so here's what some people do. They'll get these, or a set of dikes, and they'll do this. Right? And it does get the insulation off. However, what it does is it often leaves little nicks in the wire, and the problem with leaving little nicks in the wire is that if you do, the wire will just simply break at that point. Now I actually did this pretty good, so I didn't leave any nicks, so the wire is not breaking. But oftentimes you will nick the wire, and you know, you'll end up with broken strands, and you'll also end up with nicks down here, and the wire will just simply break. Okay? You don't want that. You don't want that. You don't ever want to use these types of things. You know, you want to use proper strippers. Okay? Let's just start there. If you don't use proper strippers and your wires keep on breaking, well, you know, what can I say? Use strippers. There is this type. Now, okay, now this is for electrical work. These are large ones, but they make smaller ones. I have some that are kicking around somewhere that I never use. I don't know where they are. You can use these. They have the different gauges up here, you know, for stranded wire and for solid wire. I don't recommend using these. The problem is that there is some amount of variability in the insulation and in the wire itself, number one. Number two, you know, unless you get really good ones, these sizes, they're not formed perfectly. I mean, and you could even see, I have one size here that says it's good for 24 gauge and for 22 gauge. Now, I don't know, can you see that? Okay. You know, I don't know what country you live in the U.S. 22 gauge and 24 gauge are two different sizes. All right, it can't possibly do the best job. It's either going to overcut on one, or it's going to undercut on the other one. So don't. I don't like these. And another downside is that they're more expensive than the ones that I really like. Okay, so don't use these. All right. Unless it's all you have, and then, well, I'm sorry. All right. The ones I really like for mechanical strippers, by far my favorite, and they're also pretty much the cheapest ones, and I think they work best. There are a lot of people that don't like these. I think these are the best. Are these guys here, okay? Now let's talk about why I like these. You can adjust them to exactly match your wire. Okay, they're light. They're easy to maneuver around, and yeah, it doesn't form a perfect circle here when you close it down, but it doesn't have to. All you have to do is when you do that, right? I'm not touching the wire. You don't ever want this edge to touch the actual wire. You'll leave a nick and the wire will break there, okay? What you want to do is you want to squeeze down and then pull straight, okay? What you're actually doing, let's see. All right, let me, obviously I'm unprepared here, but this is mostly just off the cuff, so we're just going to have to deal with that, I guess. Let me show you what we're trying to accomplish here. Let's see, where is it? just going to draw you a little picture. Okay? Let's draw a little picture. Draw a little picture of what we're trying to do. All right? All right. Here we go. That's your wire. Okay? That's the wire. I'm not sure, can you see it? Okay? Actually, that's the insulation. The wire is somewhere inside. Okay? Well, that's the wire, and the outside is the insulation. Okay? The goal with the wire strippers, at least the mechanical ones, is they come in and they will actually score. Well, they'll actually cut the insulation like that. Well, okay, so let's try to make it so that it's actually actually even a little bit. Okay, so they'll make a little cut like that. Now the insulation's cut. But notice that it doesn't actually touch the wire. Okay? Doesn't have to touch the wire, and it shouldn't touch the wire. It leaves just a tiny little bit of insulation behind. Now that's why I love these so much, because I could adjust them so that it's just absolutely perfect, okay? And it doesn't matter that it doesn't make a perfectly round cut. All we're trying to do is score the insulation enough that when you then tug on it, it will, this last little bit will break off, and boom, you have a perfectly stripped wire. And you haven't damaged the wire. That's the most important thing. If you damage that wire, oh boy, you're going to have trouble like you wouldn't believe. Okay? It's never going to be a reliable joint. Ever. It's always going to break there. Always, 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 always. Okay? Okay. By the way, I've also seen people use their teeth. They have just that, you know, the perfect space right there. And they do it. I cringe every time I see that. Probably works fine. It just, you know, I don't know. It just looks like it would hurt. But whatever. All right. When you use these, okay, there's a great temptation. Great temptation to use them like this. Get this, and then you do that, and yeah, pull, right? And you can see I just broke the wire, okay? If I do it, let's see if I can, you know, do it a little bit less. Okay, so this time I didn't actually really break too much of the wire. Right, there are a couple of strands. I don't know if you can see them. There are a couple of strands that actually broke off there. The problem is if you do it sideways like that, and there's a great temptation there, because it's hard to hold on to this wire. You kind of want to right, but you can't, because you'll start breaking strands, right? Because you're pushing the wire into the cutting edge. You're defeating the purpose of what we're doing, right? But even more dangerous is the strands that you didn't see break. There's probably a lot of strands here that we didn't see break, and that will just break right off. Okay, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but under vibration and handling, you know, you really don't want to do that. So if you're going to use these, and you can, when you strip it, right, pull straight. You want to pull straight. Absolutely want to pull straight. Test your technique. Okay? Strip a bunch of stuff here and test your technique. Look at it under a microscope and see. Or not a microscope, a magnifying glass, okay? And see, are you actually nicking the wire? Okay? The other thing you want to do, let's say you need to strip a lot of wire, and I think this is why people end up doing this, okay? It's because what they try to do, they need that much stripped. So what they're going to do, they're going to grab it there, and then they're going to, right? And it requires quite a bit of force, okay? Instead, this takes just a little bit more time, but it's much easier. Strip a little bit at a time. Okay? And then it requires practically no force. Okay? You can strip it multiple times. That's fine. Okay? I could strip 100 feet of this, and it would be fine. Okay? All right? Well, that's kind of how you want to do it. That's kind of how you want to use these, in my opinion. All right, but again, I've been doing this for a while, and I find that that works best. You know, I'll also tell you that in my engineering travels, I also worked for a telecom at one point. Good number of years ago, maybe 10 years back. I worked for a little telecom startup, and the strippers for the for fiber optics. You know when you have to fuse fibers, or when you're when you're making connectors and things. You know you often need to strip off the cladding or buffer off of the fibers, right? Okay. Well, you do it the same way. It's the strippers you get are very similar to these. In fact, they may even be these. I don't know. I never tried using these cheapy electric ones on fiber optics, but they may actually be these. And you know how delicate those are. That's far more delicate than this ever is, right? And the technique you do, and you often need to strip an awful lot of it. And the basic technique, if you try to do it from down here and you pull up, you're just going to break the core. Not going to work. You have to do it just like I'm showing you here. Strip a little bit at a time, pull straight, okay? These actually also have cutters on them. And you can strip from the other side. It's a little bit harder because you have less to hold on to. Okay. You can turn it a little bit. It is difficult to do. It's difficult to work with small. You may have to do, if you're working with really small pieces, is maybe hold them like that with pliers. Okay. But that's fine. Okay, you can do it. Just don't bend them and do it because you're going to break the wire. All right. I'm done prattling on about strippers. All that said, I'm not going to use these. Okay? I have a much better solution. What I use are thermal strippers. You can get these in all sorts of different configurations. Some of them are more expensive than others. This is a nice Hacko thermal stripper. The way these work is the tips heat up and they actually melt the insulation off. So there's no cutting edge. This edge here, ooh, it's hot, but it's dull. It's dull, but it's very hot. I forgot that I turned it on. Believe me, it's hot. Okay. Wow. All right. And the way these work, right? You put the wire in, the insulation melts, you just turn it around, right? And it just comes right off. That's it. Very, very nice. You could even, if you want to, you can do it like that. Now it's melted, and you could actually just pull it off. Okay? They're really great because it's practically impossible to damage the wire. So that's what I use in my shop. You don't have to use that. You can use the mechanical ones. The mechanical ones are great. They also have the ones that are sort of like guns, and I think they're called automatic strippers. And you get them and you just put it on and and it'll strip the wire off. Some of them are really cheap, and they're junk. Okay, the expensive ones, the good ones, have dies. They have different dies for different size wires. They're adjustable, and they're expensive. They work great. They work really great. but they're very expensive. They're bulky. If I'm going to spend money on something like that, I would rather spend money on a thermal stripper. I actually got a really good deal on this particular one, the discontinued model, and I got an old new stock deal on it. Yeah, but if you're gonna buy those, don't buy the cheap ones. If you're gonna buy something cheap, buy the ones that I showed you. If you're gonna spend some money, spend it on high quality automatic strippers, or spend it on a thermal stripper. Okay, just my spiel on wire. All right, very good. Let's get going. The box. Obviously, a lot of what I'm doing here is not going to be applicable to your particular box. A lot of it will be. Some of it might be specific to this. You're going to have to apply it to whatever it is you're doing. My particular box, I'm going to give away all my secrets here. I get these from Pedal Parts Plus. They're very easy to deal with. Very nice people. They cater to hobbyists. They also cater to pros who need to build a lot of these things. They're very good. They're very reliable. I like them. This particular box happens to be, believe it or not, a genuine Hammond box. I don't know if you can read that. Just take my word for it. They powder coat it for me. Actually, they drill the holes to my specs. Okay. They powder coat it, and then this is actually a UV printing process. This is not screen printed. Screen printing is how you used to do this stuff. A lot of people still do screen printing. This process is really great too. This is tough as nails. I've rubbed on this, but I've tried to take this off, the printing on it, and it doesn't come off. It's really great, really great. Okay, and they do a very nice job. Oh, you know what? I should show you a little trick for this. Okay, hang on a second. This is, again, I'm not really prepared. I'm just going off the cuff here. I'm going to come back with something. It's just going to take me a minute to go to the other part of my shop and grab it. Okay, so a little trick that I do. I'm not sure how many people do this. Something that I do really helps me out. When I'm making a new box or anything like this, right? There's a lot of little holes and things to get right. And everything sort of needs to line up with the printing, especially fine details. Like you could see, if that LED were off just a little bit, that would just not look right. It would just be awful. It wouldn't be such a big deal if these were off a bit, but some of this stuff has just got to be right. It's got to be right. Okay. So how do we get it right? And how do we run our tests when we're developing stuff like this? And how are we sure that when you go off for an order, several hundred boards and 100 boxes, or 200 or 500 or however, or even just one, how are we going to be sure that everything is exactly how we want it? Well, what I do is, in my drawing program, I actually use CorelDRAW. Very nice. I'm not sure how many of you have Corel, but it's very good. I actually didn't buy it. I do need to buy it now. I actually I'm still on a rental thing. It's like $14 a month or something like that. I just got it to try it, and I really like it. So now I should go out and just buy a license for it. But anyhow, it's a little trick. You can go out to Corel and actually pay month to month and just try it out. Okay, for cheap. It's cheap. What I do is I go out and I actually make my printing the way I want it. And if you can see, I don't know if you can see that. Do you see all those little marks, the X's, right? Right, what I do is I transfer all of the locations where I think everything is going to be and everything is going to fit based on how I designed my board, based on the box and everything else. And then I take the sticker, I put it on the box. I just happen to have one here. I have a friend that one of my testers came back with an old box that I'm going to update to my latest board, and he's going to give it to a friend of his. So I happen to have one here. This is one of the earlier prototypes. Now this particular, the electronics in here aren't, it's an old board, and I didn't even bother to constrain the battery at all. But you can see, that's actually a sticker. That's that sticker that you saw. So then what I can do is go and drill all the holes where the sticker tells me to drill the holes, right? And do all my testing. I could even get the. I mean, actually, this one's a little bit beat up, but it's been out there a long time. It's been out there almost a year. You could actually just do that and be done. I mean, it doesn't look too bad. But the point is, when I'm done with that, right? Now I'm pretty confident that when I send that file off to be printed, right? As long as the drill locations that I give them are the same ones that I put into the file, that have all the, once it all fits on my sticker, I have a pretty high confidence that there's going to be no problems when I have them actually made. Now, of course, you still test one or two just to be sure, especially if you're doing a larger run. But for the most part, everything just kind of fits. So that's a great trick. You can use that trick for a lot of different things. Okay, not just this stuff. But have it printed out by a reliable printer. Don't do it on your own printer, because you're going to find that when you do it on your own printer, things are going to be skewed sometimes. What I recommend you do is some feature on here, right? Precisely measure a feature going this way and a feature going that way. So for example, on this one here, I don't remember exactly what I did, but I probably did the length of these lines, or maybe I did the length of these lines. I'm really not sure exactly what I did. But the point is, what you can do after, when you actually get this printed out, you can measure it. You could actually measure it to make sure that you're not skewed. Almost guaranteed your printer will not print out accurately, and almost guaranteed the printer that even at like Staples or Office Max or something like that will not print out accurately. But if you bring it to a real printer, they will print it out accurately. And this large sheet, you can see I had a lot of test boxes that made it out into the wild. Lots of folks helping me out here, which is great. This big sheet I think cost me like 20 bucks. It's cheap, especially if you're making a couple of them. All right. I think you can probably get just like a half sheet or something like that for much less money. Okay, so that's my little trick on how we make sure everything works, and how we actually get test boxes to send out without having to commit to a large run. Okay. All right. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start to assemble this box.